Have you ever wanted to become the bank? Well, today on Million Ways to Millions, we have an expert real estate note investor, Dale Brose, coming on to show us how a digital marketer turned real estate note investor and how you can too with only 10K. Welcome to Million Ways to Millions, where we dive into how different people build wealth today and showcasing that the American dream is still alive and well. I'm your host, Micah Haworth, a multifamily real estate investor and property manager down in Des Moines, Iowa. And today, our guest is Dale Brose. He's a digital marketer turned note investor, started with investing in small loans, growing it into a large real estate note portfolio. Welcome, Dale. How you doing, man?
Micah, good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I appreciate you hopping on, man. I've enjoyed continuing to touch base with you over the years as you kind of continue to take off more and more, man.
Yeah. The funny thing, though, I'm going to say, I wasn't a digital marketer that became a note investor because note investing existed before digital.
Oh,
So
there you go.
we'll talk about that, but yeah.
So you kind of were always a note investor.
Yeah, it's funny. We'll talk about it, but I'm surprised how many people think this is a new thing or they've never heard of this before, and it's been around for decades.
Oh, and I think note investing has almost been around as long as real estate investing.
A bit of trivia, the first promissory note, which is what we're buying when we're debt investors, the first promissory note goes back to Mesopotamia.
Dang.
Yep.
Someone dug that up. They were like, okay, let's see if this is still enforceable.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. So I would love to get a bit of your story of kind of how you
Sure.
got started, where you were first introduced to this idea of note investing.
Sure, absolutely. I'm here in the Minneapolis area. I moved up here. I was relocated up here by Northwest Airlines, if anybody remembers
Yeah.
that. I come out of the airline world.
Yeah.
So I was up here with Northwest Airlines. So we're going back to like the early to mid 1990s at this point. So I did have a couple rental properties downtown near
Yeah.
where the Metrodome was. And it took me about 45 days to realize that I'm not empathetic enough to be a landlord. But at the same time, I was buying other debt instruments. And one practice is called factoring. Have you ever heard of factoring?
No,
Okay,
inform me.
factoring is when, let's say, a small manufacturer is selling their products to
Yeah.
Walmart, Best Buy, or something like that. And in order to get into one of the big box store, the smaller manufacturer needs to give, Best Buy, they want net 90 on their invoice, right? We want 90 days to pay the invoice. And the small manufacturer is just excited to get their product onto the shelf in Best Buy. They're happy to give them whatever terms they
Yep.
want until they're, you know, 30 days, 40 days into that invoice, they don't have any money coming in. They realize I need to pay my employees and I need to pay utilities. So they'd
Yep.
find somebody like me. I would buy that invoice at a discounted price because now we're dealing with time value of money, right? Cash
Yep.
today is worth more than cash in the future.
Yep.
So I would buy it at a discount, and in 90 days, when that invoice matures, I get the face value. So you can call it loan sharking if you want, but essentially it's a discounted cash flow on a debt instrument.
And what's the typical rates on a note like that?
Oh, I mean, yeah. When you calculate in a discount, I mean, we're getting like a 12%, 15%
Sure.
yield on that, but they're short-term notes. But the point
Yeah.
is, it's simply a debt instrument and a
Yep.
future cash flow.
Yep.
There's a complete industry out there. Everybody's seen the commercials for JG Wentworth. It's your money. You
Yep.
get it when you. I knew the JG Wentworth people back in the 90s, and they're simply buying a payment stream, right? A
Yeah.
structured settlement, an insurance claim.
Yep.
A real estate note is the exact same thing in the financial markets. It's simply
Yeah.
an installment contract or a payment stream. The only difference is a mortgage note
Mhm.
is collateralized through the mortgage, deed of
Yep.
trust, whatever, to the property, which makes it unique. But so
Well,
I
and
met,
that's also why we're able to get such a high leverage on those real estate notes. The reason you're
absolutely.
able to get 70 to 80, sometimes 90% LTV is because you got the collateral.
Yeah. And it's also a reason, and I don't know if we're going to dive this deep into it, but that's why real estate, at least in the US financial market, and the MBS market, mortgage-backed security market, is a linchpin, a major component of the U.S.
Yeah.
financial system. CMBSs, they're there
Yep.
too, but they don't operate the same as the MBS market.
Yeah. I think let's get your story down, and then we can dive right into the mechanics of financial markets and all
Yeah.
that juice.
So, like I said, I was just buying other debt instruments. I was at one of
Yeah.
our national conferences in San Francisco. I met some people that were doing mortgage notes. They
Yep.
explained to me what they were doing. At the same time, I was discovering that I'm not landlord material.
Yeah.
And then I realized I like the idea of being a lien lord a lot more than being a landlord.
The
So,
lean lord. I love it.
yeah, yeah. So I kind of got out of it for a while, and then during COVID, I said, okay, I've got the time. And I always
Yep.
said if I was going to get back into real estate, I'm going to come back in as a note buyer.
Got it.
Yeah, so
And
I've been
so
doing that since 2020.
yeah, so you were introduced, you were already a landlord. You said it was in the 90s. And
Correct.
so
Yeah.
that between then and 2020, were you buying notes that whole time, or were you just doing kind of the buying the invoices and such?
Yeah, you know what? I was so tied up in the digital
Yeah,
marketing
so you're
world.
working.
I've had an
Yeah, double.
Yeah, I've had my agency for the last 14,
Got it.
15 years. So no.
Yep.
And it just got to a point where my agency gave me the time freedom and the financial freedom to get back into an investment.
Got it. So you were in real estate in the 90s. You had a couple rentals, and you're
Yeah.
like, this is way too much. I'm not interested in this. And so you were going full W-2 consulting and such. And then it
Yep.
was in 2020, you had already been introduced to this idea at this conference, as you had mentioned. And then that's where you're like,
Correct.
okay, now's the time for me to jump into this.
Yeah, there were two components in there because I mean we can discuss the financial markets, but anybody that's kind of been in real estate investing since 2008, 2009,
Yeah.
we recognize the fact that this is an artificially supported or the rate system. So once COVID happened, the conversation started happening again that are the cracks in the system going to be there, which creates the opportunity for note investors because there just really wasn't much in the 2020s and what have you because it was cheap money, right?
It was crazy.
And
Everyone could get a note. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So it's definitely been an interesting the past 6 years or the last 3 years for sure has been interesting in the non-performing note world. Yeah.
So how did you get that first note in 2020?
How did I get that first note? I think I just started so at that point, right, the internet became much more of a tool. I started doing my own research, saying who's out there doing what. Yeah, I think I just connected with some people who said, "Yeah, I got some notes to sell." Now, I'll also underline I prefer notes on unimproved land. So I was doing some land investing too. I realized I didn't have time to find these off-market land deals. I knew other land investors in the southeastern United States and central U.S. I was just communicating with them through Facebook in their community, saying, "Listen, you guys find the deals. I'll finance it. I'll finance the deal." And I created the note as a result of that. That's how I ended up with some of my notes in Tennessee. Is that I was simply the lender on the land deal. The way I structured it is that the note gets paid back first, then I get my return, and then the land investor got the back half of the note. But here's the cool thing about that. Think about the ROI for that land investor was what? It was infinite because they had no money in the deal. I financed it. They just had to wait 3 or 4 years before they started receiving payments. But it was an infinite return on their money because they didn't have any money in the deal.
Got it. So you connected with some people because you're looking at land investing. You connected with some people on Facebook.
Yep.
Through some other land investing groups, and it was from there you're like, you know what? I don't want to do the deal searching.
No.
I'll just land on it.
Yeah.
And so you said you were financing this stuff almost 100%.
Oh yeah, I was doing 100% of the financing.
Yep. And so then you would collect all the income from it until you get your note paid back, and then at that point, they would have a completely paid off piece of land, and we go off to the races.
Yep, correct. So some of my borrowers in Tennessee, their loans matured out last year. So now they've got it.
That's awesome.
Yep.
And I would love to point out like the genius part. And we talked about this when some of the couple times we had met on some real estate networking groups was that you are doing unimproved pieces of land across the country.
Yeah.
I talk about, so the biggest risk for a lender, and I think anyone watching right now, they're going to be like, hey, if I'm going to lend on something, my biggest risk is that what if this thing blows up? What if I cannot collect on what is due to me? What if my collateral is at risk?
Sure.
And there's probably nothing more risk adverse than an unimproved piece of land.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And land notes tend to be written at higher coupon rates, or the rate at which they're written, we call it the coupon rate, than residential.
Yep.
Um, uh, they tend to be shorter term,
Hmm.
3, 5, 7. I'm working with a prolific land developer down in Texas right now. They're
Yeah.
creating 20-year notes, but they're taking larger acreage, doing a full subdivide with entitlement, making
Yep.
buildable lots, fully entitled with water. They're doing
Hmm.
the septic, they're getting power to it. Now I have great admiration for people that do that, because that really increases the value of that land once you get it fully
Yeah.
entitled. So but now they're making 20-year notes available through
Hmm.
that, because then they sell off those entitled parcels. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll probably be picking up some of those down in Texas.
Awesome. And so when you're picking those up, you're buying, would it be the entire acreage or the subdivided plots?
Just subdivide it.
Got it.
Yep.
And you're just buying, you're buying their note. So they have a mega note and they're portioning it off, and you're going to buy portions of that and hold on to it.
Yep. Yep. And
Awesome.
that's the way the developer recapitalizes, right?
Yep. Exactly.
And
They're getting out of it.
yep, absolutely. Moving on, they're buying more raw land, right? And they're just repeating their process.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so you started basically connecting with people on Facebook, and then was it just kind of networking from there as far as finding more and more opportunities?
Yeah, you meet with a few key people, they refer you. I will say that the note investing world, we're a very small community.
Yeah.
I was just at one of so we have a few national conferences throughout the year.
Hmm.
First one is just a couple weeks ago down in Nashville, called the
Yeah.
Diversified Mortgage Expo. The last one of the year is in November in Dallas, and that's
Hmm.
a larger one. But at a note investor conference, there's maybe 200, 250 of us there.
Yeah.
Uh, Conversely, in October, I was at the Bigger Pockets conference in Las Vegas, and there's,
Hmm.
a couple thousand maybe there. We're very niche. So once you're in the community and you meet a few of the key players,
Hmm.
we just start to know each other.
Are there a lot of banks in these communities, or is it more of the people like yourself where you're doing smaller notes on smaller properties or second mortgages on properties and such?
Yeah, a few of the lenders will show up at the conferences.
Got it.
There's an interesting dynamic that's happening in the banks right now that they're not showing up. The the banks are still selling to hedge funds and larger players, but a
Yep.
lot of the small banks, like when I call around the smaller outstate banks here in Minnesota, even
Hmm.
though I know that they're holding non-performing loans in their portfolio, because I'm looking at their FDIC filings, right? I see their
Yeah.
non-performing loans. They just don't have a process to get rid of it. They've not
Hmm.
experienced this before. And if some of these people are they got into banking in 2000, 2010 or after, they
Yep.
never experienced any of this stuff before. But at our conferences, like the MBA is there, Mortgage Bankers Association, so those players
Yep.
are there.
After you buy a note, what
Mhm.
does that process look like when it comes to, just collecting those monthly payments? Does it take a lot of your time, or is it pretty much completely passive?
Yeah, so for we're going to call them a mortgage note. So for mortgage
Okay.
note, and just so for clarification,
Yep.
everybody understands, you have, like in Minnesota, you have a deed of trust and you have a
Yeah.
promissory note. Maybe you
Yes.
have a mortgage and promise. So we're really, and I want to be clear to your listeners and your subscribers, we're buying the promissory note.
Yes.
All
Not the
right.
deeds.
Not the
Yeah.
deed. That
Yep.
confuses a lot of people, especially
Yes.
real estate investors. We're not buying the real estate. We're controlling the real estate by owning the debt on the real estate and
Yes.
taking over the promissory note. Okay. So now that
Yes.
we've clarified that, depends on the type of loan, right? So
Mhm.
if we're dealing with a contract for deed versus, an agency loan, like say a Fannie, a Freddie, a USDA,
Mhm.
a VA loan, or something like that, there's
Yep.
going to be a bit of a different process.
Yeah.
Um, if we're talking about traditionally created residential mortgage notes,
Mhm.
Fannie, Freddie, FHA, USDA, whatever, it's a very, very simple process, right? You have a seller and you have a buyer. Um, they say, hey, like I'll get spreadsheets of loans every week that lenders are selling.
Mhm.
It's a bidding process. They put out the spreadsheet, we call that the tape,
Mhm.
and they take bids. We can cherry pick. We're not buying the entire portfolio. If
Mhm.
there's a few of them I like, I will submit a bid. Then there's a
Mhm.
bidding process back and forth. If I'm the winner of the bid, they send me what we call the collateral file. All the information about that loan that they have, they will send it to me in digital format. That begins my due diligence period, right?
Got it.
There is no set time. It's just an agreement. Hey, I need 30 days. I need 45 days to go through these. If
Hmm.
there's anything in the collateral file that I don't like, borrower's history, how it was underwritten,
Hmm.
anything that looks funky to me, I can fade my bid. It's called fading the bid, which means I'm going to drop my bid on this because I found some red flags.
Got it. You're just
Let's,
pulling out.
yeah,
Yeah.
or just cancel it. I can say I'm
Yeah.
out. There was no earnest
Yeah.
money involved. No, I didn't wire any money yet.
Which
Well,
this also sounds a lot like the traditional buying process of real estate, where there is a due diligence period. You have some time to pull out if you want to.
yep, yep.
Awesome.
So, and then there's no, you cancel it, no hard feelings. The only thing is you don't want to cancel your bid with a particular lender too much because then they'll just quit sending you
Yeah.
loans, right? Because you're just tire kicking. But let's suppose everything goes fine. We
Mhm.
agree. I wire the money. The only documentation, the only closing process is they issue an assignment of mortgage. They assign the mortgage to me. That's it. We're done. There's nothing.
Yeah.
The only other step may be if they were servicing the loan in-house or if they had it with a loan servicing company,
Hmm.
their in-house loan servicing or their servicing company will send the borrower a goodbye letter.
Hmm.
I will move it to my loan servicing company. My loan servicing company sends the hello letter saying we've taken over this loan, and then they
Yep.
set up how are you going to make your monthly payments.
Got it. And so the servicing company handles basically getting the payments directed to your account.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the convenience factor that they communicate with the borrower. They handled all that. They do my tax forms at the end of the year. All that
Awesome.
they do all communications with your borrower. But here's
And
the other component, though.
what does that cost having that
A
a third
performing
party?
loan, yeah, a performing loan, $30 a month. I mean, if you're paying $50 a
Yeah.
month, you're paying a lot for loan servicing on a
Yeah.
performing loan, right?
Yep.
But here's the other component, and depending on where your listeners are in the country and what state, I was going to say, if you're going to get into note
Yeah.
buying, at least you got to be familiar with your local laws and
100%.
or the
Always.
laws of the state where you're buying loans.
Yeah.
But like in the state of Minnesota, if you're doing this a lot, if you're selling your own home on seller financing, it's not going to be a problem. But if you're doing it as an investor, now you're becoming a debt collector
Hmm.
and you don't have a debt collector's license,
Got it.
right? So I'm using a licensed loan servicer that has all the licensing. I don't need to worry about that. And
Got it.
that's worth that $30 to $50 a month.
Awesome. And so they're not only handling the communication with your a client or owner, and collecting and all the proper notices, but also they have licensing to boot. And
Correct.
so really, and you don't have to worry about that buying anywhere because each local municipality or state may have their various licensing requirements. And so
Correct.
this loan servicing, no matter where you're buying in the country, fits that bill for you.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So again, down in Nashville, I met a loan servicer. He's out of the Texas market. I liked him. I mean, we got along well. I hope to do business with him, but he only does Oklahoma and Texas. So
Mhm.
I can't use him for anything that I have in, like I have some in upstate New York and I have some in Arkansas. I can't use them, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what are the average sizes that you're dealing with these notes? Now, I know it was a little bit smaller when you got started. Maybe if you introduce us, like what are kind of those first handful of notes that you were working with, and then what sort of sizes are you seeing now? Is it 10? Is it 30? Is it 200?
No, I mean, my buy box, I tend to end up in between that $30,000 to $50,000
Got it.
note. Because my biggest thing is not necessarily the size of the note, it's the yield I'm getting on the investment.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's my biggest
Yeah.
factor when I come into it.
And so when it comes to like value add note investing or trying to find a deal with note investing, how does that work? Because the interest rate when you purchase it is still the same. But
Uh,
what really depends or determines that return for you? What are you looking for when you're trying to look for a good deal? What does a good note investing deal look like?
that's a great question. I'd say the funny thing is it's not much different from real estate investing.
Hmm.
I'm looking for a motivated seller. right? So they're cash motivated. They're selling that
Mhm.
note because they need that cash. What do they need
Yep.
it for? Do they need it to pay for a kid's wedding, college, whatever the situation?
Hmm.
Now if it's institutional paper, that's a different ball game, right?
Yeah.
They're just selling assets off of a spreadsheet. If it's somebody
Mhm.
that's selling getting rid of a seller finance note, right? Maybe they sold
Yep.
an investment property and they
Yep.
sold it on seller financing and they've been holding that note for the last 5 years and they still got,
Mhm.
10, 15 years of payments left on that. And they realize, oh, I can sell this on the secondary note market.
Yep.
And then I would need, what do you want out of this?
Yeah.
Because you're going to have the unpaid balance of the loan, what
Mhm.
we call the UPB. But then I'm going to offer them a discounted price off the unpaid balance of the loan.
Mhm.
As, Assuming, let's suppose the note it was originated at, let's say, an 8% or a 9% coupon rate, right? That's the face value to the borrower. They're paying a 9% interest rate.
Yep.
By discounting the unpaid balance, I can actually drive my yield to a
Mhm.
10, a 12. The ones I'm holding in Texas, Arkansas right now, they're a 15% annualized yield on those. Um,
Incredible.
yeah,
15%.
yeah,
That's incredible.
15%. So, and that's simply a function of the financial calculator, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, what you're doing is that they have 50, say 50 grand left on the notes that they're due, the debt
yep,
holder, and you're buying it and you're paying them 40 or whatever it may be.
or
But
whatever. Yep,
you're just buying it for less than what they are owed, and that's just them taking into account the today value of money. Of
yep,
hey, I have an opportunity I want to go pursue. I want to get out of this. I want to sell this.
yeah.
And
Uh,
I've
I'll give you
I've actually yeah, go ahead.
another example of how that works. Is you might have a prolific note investor that has several residential notes
Hmm.
and they'll portfolio them and sell off the whole thing or they sell them all individually because maybe they want to go buy a commercial asset or maybe they
Yeah,
want to go buy a multifamily. So it is a liquid instrument from that standpoint as you can buy them and sell
yeah.
them.
And it seems that it's kind of easier to buy and sell them versus buying and selling property, which makes it a great tool of, hey, I'm going to store some cash here. And then at a later date, when I want to, liquidate and buy something bigger, I've gotten a solid return at this point. I can liquidate this as if it is cash and then buy something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Awesome.
there is a if you're into it or if you have, I would say if you have listeners that are real estate investors, maybe they're tired landlords and just want to get out of
Yeah.
it and they've been looking at, well, I don't want to lose the cash flow, but I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with the rental property anymore or anything like
Yeah.
that. If they're creating notes, if they're creating seller finance notes, hopefully through this session you've introduced them to somebody that can buy those notes from them
Yeah.
and I can be a conduit for them to the entire secondary note market. But yeah, it is a
That's
liquid
awesome.
instrument. It is a very simple process. And it's funny, every time I present to real estate investors on this topic, there's almost like, I don't want to say deer in the headlights look, but it's almost like they give me that, there's got to be more to it than what you
But
described. I said,
really?
no,
Really?
no.
15%?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That,
Um,
but, I assume like, what is that average interest rate looking like to you? Like, because you're going through multiple deals, you're saying no to a lot of stuff. So, like, how long does it typically take you to find a good opportunity, and what is that average interest rate or return to you that you're looking for?
12.
12. Got it.
Yeah. So when I get so a great example. Somebody just sent me a contract for deed
Mhm.
down in Oklahoma on 7 acres, nice house on 7 acres.
Yep.
Now the difference from a note investor to a real estate investor is
Hmm.
the asset is secondary to me, right?
Hmm.
I don't want to spend time looking at the pretty trees on the acreage and the house. I'm not buying that.
Yep.
Remember, I'm buying the
Yes.
debt. I'm buying the promissory note. All I want to know is, does the asset act as adequate collateral for the remaining balance of the
Hmm.
loan? That's really all I care about. This note was originated at 8%. I do my math. I look at, how many payments are left in it and all that type of stuff. And then I
Hmm.
discount it to a 12% yield. That's my initial offer.
Yep.
So it was written at 8. If I were to pay the full unpaid balance of the loan or do what's called a par bid,
Hmm.
I would be getting 8% annualized.
A little bit of golf slang on there.
Right. Yep. And then, but I say, hey, I'm always going to shoot for a 12.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I'm going to discount it till I get to a 12 yield. Say, oh,
Hmm.
your unpaid balance on this was like 53,000,
Yeah.
55,000. I told them, I said, I'm gonna have to come in at 48.
Yep.
That begins the negotiation. They might say, go
Yeah. Go
blank
kick rocks.
yourself. Yeah. Or they could say, okay. And then I got my 12%.
There you
How long does it take? I would say after spending, a good amount of time on LinkedIn, communicating with people, talking about what I do to people like you
go. Yeah.
and other real estate investors. Now on a weekly basis, I never know what I'm going to see in my inbox. Right?
Yeah.
This contract for Dean down in Oklahoma, it was a LinkedIn contact. Right?
Awesome.
So I never know.
Mm-hmm.
And the time, I would say the due diligence,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere from, because that's really where you do your work, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same in real estate, is you make your money on the purchase,
Yep.
right? So it could be anywhere from a couple hours to several hours of due diligence, depending on how complicated the loan
Mm-hmm.
is and the history behind the loan and
Yep.
all that kind of stuff. But let me give you an example of why this became a red flag for me, is because in the state of Oklahoma, even though it's a contract for deed is still treated the same as a mortgage in Oklahoma. So if my
Mm-hmm.
borrower defaults, so when people think contract for deed, oh, contract for deeds are great because if they default, I can just cancel it and you're out,
Yeah.
right? Not in Oklahoma. It's
Nope.
treated as a mortgage. And the other thing is, then you got to know, what are my foreclosure laws in that state?
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, even though it's west of the Mississippi, is a judicial foreclosure state. So what's the cost of foreclosure on judicial? So these are the kind of things that you just begin to factor
Yeah.
into. Does this purchase make sense?
Well, and it's looking at, hey, this local municipality has these laws where if something were to go wrong, there's certain financial cost to it. And
Mhm.
so you've determined that, hey, in this market where I need to go through the entire foreclosure process, that's just not worth it to me.
Yeah, if it's there, I
Yeah.
mean, if it were to happen, and
Yeah.
the borrower on this particular, they've been paying for 10 years, but they're what we call slow pay, or
Hmm.
somewhat irregular. They miss a payment, they make a double payment.
Hmm. Yep.
Because at some point you're still dealing with humans
Yes.
and the complexity of humans. So
Yeah.
so, but you'd have to factor all those things. Is if I did need to foreclose on them, I do not have the benefit of just saying, "Oh,
Hmm.
sorry,
Hmm.
you've gone delinquent," or what have you, and nope, I got to go through a judicial foreclosure. So
Yep. So what is the kind of a good foreclosure process look for you, or when you're looking at markets to invest in? What sort of foreclosure process kind of has less of those hurdles to overcome or financial cost to it? Because like if you own a note and someone defaults on the note, you have to foreclose on them to get the property back. So is there states to just make it easier essentially?
there are states. I mean, Georgia is considered. I mean, Georgia is unique when it comes to notes because of some lack of clarity in the licensing requirements. I think Georgia was going to try and make it so you had to have a
Yeah.
license to own notes. So I don't want to complicate things. So you still got
Yeah.
48 other states to work with. Um, uh, and I would say, Texas for sure. That's a popular one because of fast foreclosures. Yeah.
Yep.
Actually, Minnesota's not bad. I'm not too terribly clear on the foreclosure laws down in Iowa.
Hmm.
But you'd want to know is, am I buying in a state that is judicial or is it non-judicial? Or
Hmm.
like Minnesota, Iowa might be the same way. We can do both judicial and non-judicial foreclosures.
Yep.
And then to know what's the cost of a foreclosure in that state. Am I paying 3,000? Am I paying
Hmm.
6,000? And if you're going to be a note investor and you say, "Hey, I'm going to focus on these few states," it
Yep.
doesn't it doesn't hurt to start lining up foreclosure attorneys in those states too.
100%.
Yeah.
You always want to have some backup. No, I definitely get it, man, and it makes a lot of sense, and I feel like people making sure people kind of grasp it. So, like you're networking and you're going through leads just like any real estate investor does, and you got to go through a lot of leads to find some good ones. But
Yep.
like for example, kind of talking about how some of these notes get originated. So when I bought my 12 unit, I did a seller carryback, or
Yep.
I had the seller did a seller carryback. So he did a $65,000 seller carryback, which allowed me to get into the deal with 13% down.
Hmm.
And then, like 6 months to a year into it, the seller texts me and is like, "Hey, man, like if you ever wanted to, I kind of want my cash back. So if you ever wanted to pay it off early, I would take less than what I'm owed."
You're basically
And so,
buying your own note at that point.
yep. So I'd be buying my own note. So, I owe probably another $63,000 on it. And he's like, yeah, I would take less. And,
Yeah.
he never nailed down the exact amount what less he would take. But say if I can convince him to take 55, then or and maybe at this point I don't have the cash. Maybe I reach out to you. You could then come in and pay my seller
Yep.
for a little bit less discounted in order to get the return you want.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's a conversation amongst many of us note investors is in 2026 and going forward. So I do get spreadsheets on a weekly basis from lenders, right?
Right.
Tens of millions of dollars worth of loans,
Mhm.
and all different types, early buyouts, we call them EBOs. Anyway, but there's that baby boom generation which
Yeah.
is aging out, right? So I've had those conversations with some of those baby boomers. So rather than selling all your real estate and taking a massive capital gains hit,
Yep.
why not just sell it all on seller financing?
Hmm.
You've got the note. Now you can sell that note for a cash value or something like that. Or, especially when it comes to probate,
Mm.
and I've had this conversation with probate attorneys too, and some older guys up in northern Minnesota that had large acreage. And I said, well, rather than leaving them the land, which they're going to fight over what to do with, why not just sell it to me on seller financing? And then you can just instruct the attorney to give X percentage to each of the siblings, so then they have monthly cash flow coming in, rather than leaving them an asset which they're going to fight over.
Yeah. So I think this could be a very key thing for investors who are trying to get people to sell to them on seller finance.
Hmm.
Is if there is a way for them to introduce them to the secondary debt market, of like, hey, yeah, like this seller finance note works for me, but because of the rate environment. So it's
Yep.
like, hey, I can't buy this at your asking price because of the current rate environment, but I can buy it if you do a seller finance note, I can buy it at this interest rate.
Hmm.
At that point, if you want the cash today still, you could go and try to sell that note on the secondary debt market, and you would be able to get your cash right now.
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of strategies beyond that. They could sell a part. So let's suppose they did that, right? The seller, and they
Yep.
said, "All right, I'll carry back on a 20-year note at eight and a
Yep.
half percent."
Sure.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Micah, because like I said, that's a mission that many of us note buyers is trying to communicate this to get the word out to real estate
Yeah.
investors about the secondary note market, because most people
Yeah.
don't know about it, or even how to access it. So hopefully I
Mhm.
can be that, a launching point for them on that.
Yeah.
But they can sell a part of their note. They can
Mhm.
sell the first 10 years of the note. We call that selling a partial. You're selling a
Okay.
piece of the note and you're
Mhm.
retaining the back end of the note. So that's called selling a partial.
So you're selling the right to collect for the first 10 years on this note. And then at that point, the payments automatically hop back to you.
Correct. I mean, because my like when I set it up with the loan servicer, those instructions are included in the
Mhm.
loan servicing agreement, and the loan servicer says, okay, after payment 120, all payment 121 starts going over here. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is so the part with the loan servicing company is awesome because now you don't even have to think about it.
Nope.
But it speaks to the liquidity of these notes. So like, hey, I want to free up some quick cash. I don't want to sell this entire note, but I'll sell 5 years. I'll
Hmm.
sell 10 years.
Hmm.
I'll sell a 5, 10 year partial. And then that allows you to get that quick cash when you want it. Your other note investor collects in the meantime, but then it goes back to you, and it just shows how flexible these assets are.
Yep.
Versus real estate, it's much harder. And there's definitely ways to do it, master lease or something like
Hmm.
that, but it definitely makes it more muddy where there's more risk, say, if you're doing a master lease a property, because they could destroy the property, versus if you're selling a partial to a note investor, there's nothing they can really do to ruin it in the sense
Nope.
they just collect.
Nope. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is somebody pays off the note early,
Mhm.
right? I mean, and that's not a bad thing because suddenly the yield goes way up, right? Because you
Yeah.
shorten the duration of the payment. And then also for the person that sells the partial, because the payment to the borrower never changes,
Yeah.
by selling the front half and bringing cash in, they've reduced their cost basis significantly. So now their yield on the back half is significantly higher than it originally was.
Yeah, because now there was that cap, the return on capital that happened pretty quick.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome. That is awesome. All right. So maybe we step a little bit into talking about how this interacts with kind of the mechanics of financial markets.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Wow. Okay. So this is one of my favorite subjects. When I teach about this, I simply
Mhm.
teach it to people, and especially real estate investors that would come to my, sessions. Is I just want them to understand or be cognizant of how it's all connected, right?
Yes.
Because especially in real estate investing, and there's nothing wrong with it, but in real estate investing, it becomes so focused on the asset, right? And
Hmm.
that's what it's all about. Is I want to acquire this asset. There's not a whole lot of attention being paid to how does this all work into the financial system, and why are mortgage rates where they're at, and what's going on,
Yeah.
right? Because it
Yeah.
really bothers me when I turn on the TV and they said, "Oh, Jay Powell did this. That's why the mortgage rate." No, it's got nothing to do with Jerome Powell. It's got nothing to do with the Fed.
Yep.
It's the 10-year. It's a yield
Mhm.
on the 10-year Treasury. That's what it's really tied to.
Yeah.
So okay, so let's start with this. Let's start with your
Yeah.
basic real estate transaction.
101.
Just so people see kind of, let's pull back the curtain a little bit.
Yep.
Somebody buys a house and then people say, "Hey, when are you going to lock in your rate?" Right? We've all heard that. When are you going to lock in your rate? That means something to the borrower, right? I'm going to lock in my rate at a certain thing. But what that really means is as soon as you lock in your rate, that's the rate at which the lender has locked it in with the buyer. Because as soon as that note is locked in, they've already sold it, right? So if you went to Wells Fargo and you
Mhm.
got a home loan, once you lock in your rate, that's a signal that the bank is now, all right, you agreed to
Mhm.
7.5%. That's the yield that the mortgage-backed security investors are going to get on this note, right?
Got it.
So it's really two sides of the same coin. I'm paying
Mhm.
7.5%, but that's because that's what the lender is selling that loan at. And I think a lot of people don't realize that Wells Fargo, Bank of they don't hold loans, right? They
Yep.
originate loans, but they don't hold it. All those loans, all those
Mhm.
what we'll call agency loans,
Yeah.
they get sold off. I'm sure you watched the movie The Big Short.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think everybody in real estate should watch the movie The Big Short. Not just for the entertainment quality, but they do a good job of explaining how the MBS market works,
Yes.
right? And
Yep.
the tranches and all that kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
CDOs, collateral debt obligations, all that.
Yep.
So the lenders originate loans, they retain the servicing right. So you're still making your monthly payment to Wells Fargo or
Hmm.
whatever. That's simply because they retain the servicing right and they're getting
Yeah.
paid to service the loan.
Yep.
Those loans get sold off, they get packaged up
Hmm.
into MBSs, they get collateralized, and they get sold on Wall Street as mortgage
Yeah.
backed securities. Those mortgage backed securities, or the purchase of those mortgage backed securities, was what provides the liquidity to the real estate market.
Mhm.
That's what makes it possible to make future home loans because of that money. Now,
Well, people need to understand is that so U.S. Bank, Wells Fargo, these are basically deal getters. They're
yeah,
salespeople.
yep,
And
they're
so they're there
originators.
finding loans originating. And so originating means they're creating them. They're finding the client, they're finding the property, they're collateralizing the loans. And then they immediately sell it and they turn into your loan servicer, just
Correct.
like you had said. And
Correct.
so they're getting a little bit of money on the side just from the servicing the loan and collecting on it, but they've already sold it because all they're really wanting to do is originate some loans, sell those loans off to the larger debt markets and mortgage-backed securities, or putting them into a mortgage-backed security,
Yep.
and then they're just collecting on them. And so
Absolutely.
really, there are salespeople who are getting commissions.
Right, right. And like I said, once you hear the term lock in your rate,
Yeah.
that's the verb, that's the terminology mean we've sold your loan at that rate to an
Yep.
MBS. Okay, so let's talk about mortgage rates and how it all works
Yeah.
together. So let's think about it. You and I are both, we've got tens of billions of dollars that we're going to put somewhere. We want kind of the
Yeah.
best risk-free return that we can get on our money. And we have the
Hmm.
option. We can buy treasuries. We can buy 30-year treasuries. We can buy
Hmm.
something at a certain yield, right? They just had a 30-year
Hmm.
auction yesterday, and they went for like 5.01. They went over 5%. So whoever's
Hmm.
buying those 30-year bonds, it can be other countries, it can be large institutionals, they're getting a 5%. Risk-free,
Yep.
right? As risk-free as you can get.
Yep.
Or I can buy a mortgage backed security. Now,
Yep.
why is the so we say a mortgage is a 30-year loan traditionally or
Mhm.
usually. We can talk about why me as a note investor, I would love to see 50-year loans. I would love
Mhm.
to see 50-year loans because of the amortization schedule. But you say, well, why wouldn't that be tied to 30-year? Because
Mhm.
on average, we know that home loans get refinanced every 7 or so years.
Yep.
So what's closest to 7 years would be the 10-year treasury.
Yep.
That's the comparable. So
Hmm.
we say, well, I could buy a 10-year, a mortgage-backed security tied to the 10-year. I'm assuming certain risk. I'm assuming risk of the borrower's abilities within that tranche or within that
Yeah.
portfolio of loans.
They could not pay it back. Yeah.
Right. So I'm saying, okay, now I'm holding these MBSs, but I know, yeah, we can say historically that people refinance. So even though it's a
Mhm.
30-year note, I'm getting paid off in 7 to 10 years, right? They're paying me off. I get my money
Yeah.
back. So my yield goes up. If you're watching the 10-year yield and mortgage rates, you'll notice
Mhm.
there's a spread there.
Yep.
That's the risk premium that the MBS buyers want over the 10. If I could buy a 10-year or I could buy an MBS,
Yep.
there's a risk premium. Now, why has that spread been bigger recently is
Hmm.
because the refi world has frozen up. People are not refinancing out of those
Hmm.
loans. So
Yep.
now the MBS buyer is saying, well, I was counting on a 7-year refi window,
Yep.
but now they're not refining. So when you add more time, you increase the risk.
Yeah.
So now I want a bigger risk premium.
And this is like simple, like it sounds complex, but this is simple supply and demand. This is people with large amounts of money, and some of these people, they're just trying to invest 401ks, or their country is trying to store their wealth.
Yep.
And so this is what is the best return I can get. Just like any of us, when we're investing, we're looking for a solid return, and we're
Hmm.
trying to place that much money. It's just harder and harder. And so they're looking at, I could always buy a 10-year treasury note and get X% of whatever it is today, or I can buy some mortgage-backed securities, and statistically, I'll get paid back within 10 years. And
Correct.
because we know that there's the refis are typically happening within 5 to 7 years. And so they're taking this risk, as you said, that they're averaging it out of, like, you know what, I'm statistics, looking at buying trends, refi trends. Okay, these people are typically going to refi out. That means I'm gonna get all my money back. And in the meantime, I'm making 7% when right now it's 5%
Right.
in the 10-year treasury market. And so it's simply people looking at, oh, hey, the reason the 10-year treasury, it has a say, or we pay attention to it, is because that is just what the large debt buyers are comparing it to.
Hmm. Yep. It's simple. I mean, it's a very a pragmatic view from them, and it can be, like you
Yeah.
said, it's a large investors, it's insurance companies that are buying them, it's pension plans
Mhm.
that are buying them, it's all these large
Yep.
institutional players. So, so that's one thing I always encourage real estate investors, at least be aware of how do
Mhm.
those parts of the financial market work, because there's always going to be those other
Yeah.
components like when COVID hit, the treasury started buying MBSs, which that's why we saw 3% mortgages. That's why we
Yeah.
saw those as stupid mortgage rates, because the treasury was using our money, tax dollar, or they're creating money
Yep. Printing it.
to buy mortgage-backed securities to drop that down because MBSs were not
Mhm.
being bought by those institutional investors. So
Mhm.
yeah,
And and,
and
and the MBSs were not being bought, as you mentioned, because the refis had dropped.
well, refis kicked. So if we're talking not initially when the Treasury started buying the
Yeah.
MBSs in 2021, what we were in kind of that 2023, 2022, 23,
Yep.
24 when refis weren't happening. But I think people
Mhm.
stopped buying MBSs because they're still saying, I remember 2000, 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Could this be another catalyst for a major correction? I don't want to
Mm.
hold those
Yep.
mortgage-backed securities if we
Yep.
see defaults go through the
Yep.
roof.
And that's one big factor there, is like, okay, how do defaults factor into this? Well, it's because that MBS has become more and more risky.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
so that 5%, even though they could be getting 7% on an MBS, that 5% from the treasury looks a lot more attractive because the default rates are rising. And
absolutely.
then as an economy standpoint, the reason they started buying notes or buying MBSs is because there was a liquidity issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so now these banks, Wells Fargo, who are originating these notes, have now used up their cash, and they can't, or they're starting to use up their cash where they don't have as much liquidity, and now they can't give mortgages.
Yep. Yep. And so when you think about that, you explain that
Mhm.
perfectly. And you can think about that scene from The Big Short. We had a stack of Jenga blocks
Yep.
talking about the B's, triple B's, the C's, all those, that tranche of
Yep.
loans. And you start getting that weakness in that tranche of loans, and the whole card, the house of cards comes down. Yep. So so what will happen there too is, like on the secondary note market, right? So then Fannie will have an auction. They'll sell 6,000 loans. A hedge
Mhm.
fund will go in and buy them, or an insurance company will go in and buy them. There's going to be some of those loans that they don't want. Some of them have a trade desk, which is where we'll get our loans, right? That's another source of loans that I can get, would be from a fixed income fund that's shutting down, or from a fund. A friend of mine down in Denver, he's going to send me a list,
Mhm.
because he's getting a list, and he says, "Hey, if you want to buy any of these notes
Yeah.
on this tape, let me know." So yeah,
These larger, institutions, they will sometimes jump to the secondary note market to sell off some of their portfolio when there's opportunity, or
yeah,
it's kind of like a fire sale, they're trying to sell at a discount just because they want to get off.
yeah. I mean, a prime example are some of the fixed income funds that I
Yeah.
know. They might just be running, fund two might be a 5-year fund. Well, in year five, they're still holding these notes that have
Yeah.
several years left of payments on them, but they're shutting that fund down. So they just
Mhm.
sell the assets out of that fund. Nothing wrong with the loans.
Yeah.
It was just a 5-year fund. But but I think for
Mhm.
your community, the biggest one
Yeah.
is, yeah, there's a whole big institutional world out there and all that, and it's big and it's great and it's cool. Uh, but there's such an opportunity amongst I've always
Yeah.
taken the position that every real estate investor should know a note investor, just like note investors need to know real estate investors. And
Mhm.
we're the other side of the same coin that you're at. We're just on the debt side, and we can work together, we can
Yep.
collaborate. One of the groups the people I'm looking for right now are real estate investors that maybe they're fix and flippers, they're
Mhm.
rehabbers, and maybe they're selling, right? They rehab a property and they sell it on seller financing, not
Yeah.
knowing that there's somebody that would buy that note from them.
Yeah.
Or everybody assumes that getting into real estate is that, no, I'm going to rehab a house and then my only option is to turn it into a rental. No, it's not, right? You have other
Mhm.
options. Or if you're that
Yeah.
tired landlord, there's one in Minneapolis right now that somebody told me about. He's got 25 rentals in Minneapolis.
Mhm.
He wants out. So they reached out to me as, how do I do this?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me help you. Let me help you
Yeah.
do it properly, because,
Mhm.
like, my question to the guy on the contract for deed is, when you're selling on seller financing, there's other things to know. Like, are you compliant with Dodd-Frank when you're doing
Mhm.
seller finance? Because
Yeah.
there's things to know in order to
There's
make.
nuance in there to make sure you're compliant. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But this turns into a massive strategy where it's like, instead, so like, and we can talk about kind of the tax with it too, that tax implications, where if you're a retired landlord and you want to get out, but heck, you want passive income. If you sell everything, you get all that cash.
Yeah.
Now you got to pay tax on that. You're losing 35-40% on cash, if you're lucky, on
Well,
taxes if you're lucky.
now, if you're a retired landlord and you've held that property for 30 years, have you seen appreciation?
Yep.
So your capital gains is going to be significantly higher than if you just, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
So there's all this risk now, and so whenever I do a seller finance offer, I always try to throw in of like, hey, after you pay taxes, you have this much cash, and
Hmm.
then if you try to go invest this, say in a normal retirement fund, and you're collecting maybe 4% because you're doing conservative withdrawal, now you're making 4%. This is what you're making. Really, though, an opportunity that they have is to just seller finance it, especially if they own a lot of it cash, or seller finance the portions that they have. And then if they want the cash then and there, they could sell it on secondary debt market or just transform themselves into a debt collector.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I try and help them is understand if you want to sell all your rental properties on seller financing, let me connect you with the MLO, make sure your borrowers are properly qualified, and let's make sure that
Yep.
your paper that you're creating is
Yep.
legally compliant. Let's just make sure it's quality paper. Because if you create crappy paper,
Yeah.
you're going to have a hard time selling it on the note market because we know what we're looking for in that.
Yep.
Um,
Because
so
that's
yeah,
key. The contract is key. So
yeah,
you're taking responsibility of that agreement, and if
yep.
it's not up to snuff, then it just makes it less valuable.
Yeah, I mean, you can have the best written contract for deed, but if you can't enforce it in the courts, it's
Mhm.
not worth the paper it's written on, literally.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I can help them with that. And another group I'd mentioned that owning or buying notes is well suited for are people that want to get into real estate and they want to do it out of a self-directed IRA because you can own
Mm,
mortgage notes in a self-directed IRA, and
yeah.
because it's completely hands-off and passive, it it
Yep.
it meets the no self-dealing requirement of a self-directed IRA.
Yeah. Because all the money goes directly back to the IRA.
Yep.
And
And
that's an important factor. If you're investing out of your IRA, none of that money or the money from the assets they bought that it owns can go to your personal bank account. So it's got
no.
to stay within the IRA itself.
Yeah, and if and it,
Yeah.
like I said, and then you got the self dealing. So if you buy it, you can't go cut the lawn. You can't go do. You
Yeah.
have to be completely hands off.
Yeah.
Well, that's hard to do with rental properties sometimes, but you
Mhm.
can do it with a note because I don't deal with toilets, tenants, trash, termites, nothing. When
Yeah.
that toilet breaks on a Saturday, they don't call me because it's
Yep.
their home.
Yep. That's awesome. Yeah. And that's the beauty of the note investing is that you're still getting the passive income.
Hmm.
And you're still getting an advantage return. You're getting making 12%, but you don't got to deal with any of the headaches.
Right. Now, but now I will admit too, I mean, sometimes when I'm talking with real estate investors, I said, it's not an apples to apples comparison because
Yeah.
also I will admit I don't get the tax benefits that you get as a real estate
Yep.
investor, right? I don't get the
Hmm.
depreciation and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Do I get the advantage of appreciation? Yes, because my loan to value significantly looks a lot more attractive. But I can't tap that equity,
Yeah.
right?
Well, you could sell portions of the note or you can sell the entire note, but
Right.
you can't like refi out of it or something like yeah.
Nope, I can't refi the equity in the property. There's another thing I can do, and it's
Yeah.
called hypothecation. Have you ever heard of the term hypothecation?
I have not gonna have to
Okay,
talk slow.
yeah.
Okay.
So hypothecation, we talked about selling, X number of payments of a note, and then you
Yeah.
retain the remaining payments. So that's called selling the partial. The other thing is hypothecation, where I'm simply pledging the value
Mhm.
of my note, and I'm taking debt against that. It's the
Mhm.
same thing. You can hypothecate a stock portfolio and get a loan against that stock portfolio.
Got it.
So that's called hypothecation. Is I'm just pledging the
Yeah.
value of my promissory notes and
Yeah.
I'm taking a loan against them.
Well, you're using your notes as collateral.
Correct. So
Yeah.
in that way, we could say, yeah, I'm kind of tapping the equity there.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so if I want to get into doing some note investing, say I have some money in my IRA, I want to deploy that 10, 15, 20 grand. What would be a way for me to do that?
I'd say your listeners, they're more than welcome to reach out to me. I can probably point them in a
Mhm.
direction to go. I know people all around the country that are selling
Mhm.
selling notes. Now, what you're going to want to do if you're doing the self-directed IRA,
Yeah.
if they want to find me on LinkedIn, I do have a video on my LinkedIn that I posted where I did an interview with a self-direct a custodian of a
Awesome.
self-directed IRA, because your self-directed IRA custodian is really going to walk you through that process, right? They're not going to do due diligence on the deal. They're just going to make sure that what you're doing
Hmm.
is correctly set up.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to be with the self-directed IRA custodian that is real estate friendly, because not all of them understand
No.
buying real estate out of a self-directed IRA.
Got it. And your custodian would be someone you would transfer your IRA to. Is
Correct.
that
Yep.
essentially?
And
Yeah.
yep.
Got it.
And like directed IRA down in, where is he, in Arizona? I just saw him at the
Mhm.
conference. And there's, like I said, on my LinkedIn, there's an
Yep.
interview with one. They're in Denver, I think. But yeah,
Yep.
and they'll walk you through the process of how
Awesome.
to move a self-directed IRA.
Got it.
Yep.
So first thing to do, connect yourself with a custodian that is friendly to real estate investing and buying notes. And then after that point, Is it simply networking with people and looking for opportunities, saying, "Hey, I got some money that I want to lend," and looking for opportunities to purchase notes?
Yeah. Or
Mm,
like I said, you can just reach out to me, shoot me an
got it.
email, and I can point them in the direction of
Awesome.
what might be out there. Like I said, I get stuff on a weekly basis. I can say, hey,
Awesome.
there's some great ones I'm looking at in California right now that,
Mhm.
I know people say, oh, California, scary, but
Yeah.
yeah, California is a big state.
It's a big state. The real estate's still very, very valuable.
Yeah, people still live there, right?
Yeah, plenty of people do.
Yep.
That's awesome, man. Dude, thank you so much for hopping on. This has been an incredible conversation. I think I'm definitely going to reach out to you after this to talk about using my IRA a little bit. I think it would be a great opportunity, man.
I tell you what, if you can get, I mean, again, you're getting 12%, 14% annualized in a self-directed IRA. I don't know how you can beat that.
That sounds like an incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, is there anything else you want to tell the audience before we hop off?
So one thing I would say, so one of the guys at the conference wrote a book, and maybe I can give you a link to that too.
Yeah, I
It
can
is
throw
on
it in the description.
Amazon.
Yeah.
It's called The Storm, and
Just go
so
on.
it's actually an excellent book because it talks about what's
Mhm.
going on in the financial markets. It talks about a
Yeah.
lot of the elements because I'm a big believer in
Mhm.
investing for the future, not based on what's going on now.
Yeah.
Because as we discussed, if anybody says, well, when is the real estate market going to return to normal? And their normal is 2018.
Mm.
And I'm saying, I don't know if you have a clear concept of what normal really is because we haven't had a normal real estate market since
Yeah.
2008 and 2009. So this is looking at some of those components of
Mhm.
how do we invest for that? Because
Awesome.
anywhere that there's challenges, just like I see the stress in the market,
Yeah.
Micah. I see it. I see the impact of all these student loans coming out of forbearance. I see all
Mhm.
these delinquent FHA loans. And the thing that people don't understand is the reason we didn't see a massive stress in 2020, 2021 is because all the rescue programs that they learned about or they created in 2008, 2009 were immediately put in place with all the forbearance programs and all that kind of stuff. Take the time, maybe check that
Yeah.
book out to kind of say, where are we going with the market
Yeah.
right now? Where are those opportunities?
Awesome. Yeah. I think understanding the context in which we are investing is key. And so if for us not to be caught blindsided and jumping in an opportunity that might, suffer in the end, it might look good now, but it's not look good later. And the way you avoid that is by having a broader perspective of kind of what's going on around us.
Yeah, I mean, you're a great example of that. Is I was talking to a lot of people in 2000 in 2022 to 2023, and everybody was chasing Phoenix, Florida,
Mhm.
Texas as the markets. Well, now some of those people, and I see those home loans that are negative
Yeah.
equity now. Meanwhile, here, me in Minneapolis, you in Iowa, we're in boring markets, but we're in stable markets. So,
Yeah.
where are you investing for what's hot right now, or are you
Mhm.
investing for the long term?
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about Des Moines. It didn't get as much appreciation as Dallas, Texas did, in the last 5, 6 years, but it sure as heck is not getting as much depreciation at this
Nope,
point,
nope.
um, as everything's resettling.
Yeah,
And it's boring, but it's stable, and that's what I love about it. Yeah.
and stable is exciting to me.
Yep. The best real estate investing is boring.
Yep.
It's not super exciting when you're collecting rent month in, month out, but that is where you get your money is when it's just stable and boring. And sometimes with no investing, that is the best part.
Yep. And unless you're going to be really on top of it and you're going to be super nimble as an investor and say, I'm going to strike in the hot market when it's there, but I got an
Ah,
exit strategy lined up. I'm
no
not going to
joke.
buy and hold, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Anyway,
sure.
I could
Awesome.
go on all day. I don't want to take up.
Dude, I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much for hopping on. I'll definitely link your socials down below of people where to contact you. Where's the best place to reach you at?
Probably one of the best places to reach me at would be, I mean, LinkedIn is my only social.
Yep.
And you can certainly reach out to me, message me on LinkedIn. I'll include my email address and my phone number. People are welcome to call me or shoot me an email.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much. Thank you for hopping on Million Ways to Millions podcast. If you loved what you saw here today, please hit subscribe below. I am Micah Haworth, a property manager of Des Moines Metro. If you're looking for any property management needs, please reach out to me at grassroots.pm.com. Thanks.